Live from the world headquarters of RT America in our nation's capital, this is the news with Rick Sanchez.
And hi, everybody. I'm Rick Sanchez. Tonight, the people of Iraq continue to send what appears to be a very clear message to the United States. Let me give you some context on this first, because like most stories, this situation in Iraq didn't just happen overnight. I mean, this is something that's been building for quite some time now. So back in October, as we reported right here, there were protests in Baghdad with unrest in the infamous American Green Zone and the southern part of the country. Protesters were angry about U.S. interference and accused the United States of installing a government, and then accused that government of endemic corruption, high unemployment, inadequate public services. As a result, the Prime Minister stepped down. But it wasn't enough, because by December, protesters began asking for U.S. troops to leave their country again. January 6th, the Iraqi parliament votes to expel U.S. troops. It does so the day after the funeral of Qasem Soleimani, sending an apparent message of support to Iran. A U.S. general announces that U.S. troops will leave, but that's followed by a message from the Trump White House saying the opposite, that troops are not going to leave. President Trump threatens Iraq with sanctions for not wanting U.S. troops on its soil. So all of that gone. Now this. Take a look at this. Look at this video. This is video coming from Baghdad today, right now. Reporters on the scene describing it as a sea of people stretching for miles and miles. Tens, maybe hundreds of thousands of people marching. While massive, the demonstrations have been peaceful thus far. It is called the Million Strong March, and it's called to demand that the U.S. remove the 5,000 troops from Iraqi soil. That call for the protest was initiated, by the way, by Iraqi Shia leader Muqtada al-Sadr. Given the call for U.S. troops to leave late last year, then from the parliament, and now this massive march, what's the U.S. going to do, right? More importantly, notwithstanding an exit, will Washington be comfortable with the role then of occupier if it doesn't leave? Is there another name for it? This is the news with Rick Sanchez, where we believe it's time to do news again. All right, here we go. The list of the questions we think you're going to be asking tomorrow. If the U.S. stays in Iraq against the wishes of Iraqis, are the troops occupiers? Think about that. Turkey going beyond its borders. What are Erdogan's ambitions? And what exactly are the Ukrainian nationalist ties to Nazi Germany, and why should we care? But let's go ahead and begin tonight with this seemingly compelling argument that's being made by the people of Iraq. It would appear that the country is very dissatisfied with the presence of our troops there, and keeping them there may only make the situation more tenuous. Putting this all together for us tonight is RT correspondent John Huddy.
Whether or not 1 million or more people showed up for the Million-Man March in Baghdad today is unclear and frankly is irrelevant now, because it was certainly a massive turnout that spoke volumes about Iraqis' anger towards the United States and demands for an end to the U.S. military presence in their country. Today's demonstration has been one of many in Iraq over recent months, a country beleaguered by war and political instability, with protests raging almost daily against not only the U.S. presence there and America's 5,000 troops, but the current government led by Iraqi President Barham Salih, who met with President Trump this week at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland. Both leaders touting their friendship and fight against extremism.
And we are obviously working on a lot of things together. We're working on military, we're working on ISIS, we have a whole host of very difficult things to discuss and some very positive things also.
We have had an enduring relationship. and the United States has been a partner to Iraq, and in the war against ISIS, this mission needs to be accomplished. And I believe you and I share the same mission for a stable, sovereign Iraq that is at peace with itself and at peace with its neighbors.
And one major point of discussion between both leaders that wasn't addressed in the press availability anyway was undoubtedly the ongoing tension and political and military drama between the U.S. and Iran in the fallout from the U.S. attack in Iraq that killed Iranian General Qasem Soleimani, after which Iran then retaliated with a missile attack of its own on the Al-Assad air base in western Iraq, home to some 1,500 U.S. troops and about 2,000 coalition forces. As we now know, no one was killed, but several dozen service members were injured, some seriously, with concussions, and from what we're hearing now, possibly brain trauma. The attack has raised the specter of war between the U.S. and Iran, with perhaps Iraq and others being caught in the middle militarily and politically. Following President Trump's meeting with Iraq's president in Switzerland, pro-Iranian militias, including Hezbollah in Iraq, called the meeting treacherous, with one Hezbollah spokesperson reportedly saying that Iraqi President Saleh should be banished from Iraq. The question now, will there be another event that will catapult the region into war, or will, for now, it remain a battle of political will and virulent rhetoric? For the News with Rick Sanchez, John Huddy.
Good stuff, John. Thanks so much. From Iraq, we move to Israel, where leaders plan to gather to commemorate the Holocaust. More on that in just a little bit with Michelle Greenstein. But yesterday, while in Israel, President Putin suggested a meeting in 2020 between the leaders of Russia, China, the U.S., France, the United Kingdom to discuss the Libya situation, which still remains dire. All of this was spurred on by Turkey's recent announcement that its military stands in support of the UN-backed government of Libya. But does Turkey have ulterior motives? The whole world seems to think so. Word is it usually does. Here's the question. Does Turkish President Erdogan want a seat at the table with those nations who want to chart Libya's future? Here's something else I got to tell you about Erdogan, because I think this is very salient. So a few months ago, Erdogan openly declared that he wants Turkey to have nuclear warheads, saying that criticizing the West for mandating who can or who can't have nuclear weapons. He says they have no right to do that. Here's the words he uses. He says, "We can't have them. This I cannot accept." RT's correspondent Rachel Blevins has more on this story for us tonight.
Weeks after Turkey and Libya announced a controversial maritime agreement, the Prime Minister of Greece is now arguing that it is illegal under international law and should not be recognized as legitimate.
Libya and Turkey don't have any opposing coasts, so you cannot sign a delimitation agreement regarding maritime zones. In this case, what has been signed completely disregards the fact that our islands have right to an exclusive economic zone, which goes against everything we know in international law.
The agreement creates an exclusive economic zone in the Mediterranean between Turkey and Libya. There are also concerns over Cyprus, where the northern third of the island remains occupied by Turkey following disputes between Turkey and Greece from the 1970s. While Ankara claims the latest maritime treaty allows for fair sharing, Greece is accusing Turkey of trying to gain a monopoly on East Mediterranean gas.
This is not just about Greece versus Turkey. This is about the Eastern Mediterranean. It's about energy security. It's about the ability to build a pipeline that actually brings gas from the Eastern Mediterranean to the European Union, whether it's Cypriot gas, Israeli gas, potentially Greek gas. We don't need Turkish permission to do that.
In response to the deal, Greece expelled Libya's ambassador back in December, and Greek officials were seen holding talks with a Libyan warlord and U.S. citizen who was working to overthrow the UN-backed government, Khalifa Haftar, last week. Now, the ongoing conflict dates back centuries to when the Ottoman Empire, which originated in modern-day Turkey, was at its peak, and the land it controlled included Greece and Libya. While the leadership may be different today, experts argue that Turkey still holds itself as morally superior to the Arab nations and even Islam itself, with President Erdogan channeling the revered leader Ataturk, who was quoted as saying, "Islam, this ideology of an immoral Arab, is a dead thing. Possibly it might have suited the tribes in the desert. it is no good for modern progressive state. The current conflict has also expanded to include Egypt and Israel, with reports noting that the countries have invested heavily in energy exploration in the region and are alarmed by the Turkey-Libya move, which may threaten their ability to export gas to Europe. Now, it remains to be seen whether any of these leaders will back down, as Turkey threatens to use the agreement with Libya to start drilling for natural gas in a region Greece has claimed as its own. In Washington, Rachel Blevins, RT.
It's a good report, very comprehensive. And Michael Maloof is a former Pentagon official. He joins us now. I think the word here is assert, you know? Assert yourself. There is no question that Turkey and its leader, Erdogan, is trying to assert itself. And it seems to want to do it almost in a jealous way, in a big way. What's going on, Michael?
Well, he's trying to create a neo-Ottoman empire, and he takes his guidance from the founder of modern-day Turkey, Ataturk, in which Ataturk said that defense of Turkey is not through just at your nation state, but to a region. And the ultimate reason why you're seeing this occur today by Erdogan, he feels that he's in a political position by balancing East and West, and he gives him leverage, and at the same time, he's in competition with Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, but you know what? The thing about Erdogan is I think he's very good at playing both sides against the middle, right?
Yes, yes.
If you're a poker player, he would be pretty good, I imagine.
And he's doing a very good job of that. A lot of it has to do with the fact that he's not crazy about NATO any longer, or the EU. He was basically shoved out of that, and he's looking more eastward. He has more to gain by looking eastward at this point in cooperation, in conjunction with Russia, China, Iran, Pakistan, the whole Shanghai Cooperation Organization group.
What makes him different? Because I'll just tell you, I'm Cuban, right? I was born in Cuba. We think we're the best people in the world. We think we should have more power than any country. My Russian friends think the same thing. My French friends think the same. You're what? You're Lebanese or something, right? I'm sure
we were Phoenicians.
Right, right. So everybody thinks that we have the right. We've got to be heard. We're big. What makes Turkey different?
Well, they have more leverage today, and because they are in a very critical region of the world, they are the bridge between East and West. You're seeing, for example, you're seeing Erdogan working very hard by playing each side off. He's created this middle course corridor initiative, which will bridge China under the Belt Road Initiative with all of Europe. And he has leverage over Europe because he has 3 million Syrian refugees that he could flood in any time.
And he's in NATO.
And he's in NATO.
But yet well, I'm not saying he's besties with Putin, but he's got a great relationship, it seems. I don't know.
Oh, he does. He's
with Vladimir Putin.
Increasingly, he's buying more and more military arms, and he's looking for ways to wean away from dependency on the U.S., and we're seeing Turkey being close to Iran. They all have a vested interest in a future economic alternative world order to get out from under the dollar.
Finally, let's talk about this nuclear thing. I mean, for him to come out and say, who the hell, I mean, he didn't say who the hell, but he's basically implying, who the hell does the West think it is to tell us that we can or cannot have nuclear arms? I don't want them telling me what I can or cannot have. Yeah. That's pretty bold for a guy to say.
Well, you got a person who's very prideful, and he's not going to be dictated to by the United States or anybody else. Not that they need him, but at the same time, it's just a nationalistic thing. You don't tell us as a Turkish national what we will or will not do. It's you have nuclear weapons. If we want them, we'll get them.
But does that mean he wants them?
No.
Really?
No, it's just leverage. Once again, he's just but he has the capability. He has the capacity to develop a nuclear weapons capability if he chose to go that route. But why would he need it?
I'm a lousy poker player, but I think this guy's pretty good.
Oh, he's very good. He's very shrewd, and he's at a critical time now where he can play sides off with one another,
right? Just
as he's doing with Trump and with Putin. And I think he's waiting for the eventual time when he's going to shift eastward ultimately.
Yeah, he wants to be in Syria. He wants to be in Libya. He wants to be everywhere.
Well, you're seeing this all as part of the extension of the neo-Ottoman Empire. That safe zone up in Syria, will he ever leave? No. He wanted territory from Aleppo all the way to Mosul in Iraq. He has bases there. You see him extending his influence into Qatar.
It's a fascinating development, one I hope we can stay on top of, because I think there's more to come. Thanks so much. We appreciate it, Michael.
Pleasure.
You know, Airbnb came out this week and said that it's trying to change the way that it does business. It's one of a bevy of new companies that are pledging to make a commitment to a positive contribution to society. It's even talking about sharing its profits with workers. That sounds crazy, right? Remember, the idea of business is usually to simply make a lot of money, right? For its owner or its shareholders. That's what businesses are supposed to be. This is supposed to be the sacrosanct way that business is done, especially reinforced since the Reagan administration. It's all been kind of put in our heads, right? If you're a good American, that's what you believe in. Well, here comes Airbnb saying, no, we want to change that model somewhat. So we covered this story a little bit yesterday, but I wanted to get somebody else's take on this. Dr. Richard Wolff, he writes about this, he talks about this, the future of how companies might be able to be put together. He's an econ professor. He also hosts a really cool podcast. It's called The Economic Report, and there you see Dr. Richard Wolff joining us now. What do you make of this story that the Wall Street Journal and everybody else is running with Airbnb trying to say, we're going to change the way business is done in this capitalistic society of ours?
Well, to be honest with you, Rick, and I know your program wants to tell it the way it is and not the way the PR folks write it, I don't think much of this. I don't think there's much here. I think this is a bit more PR, and let me explain why.
Really?
You're absolutely right. Back in the 70s and 80s, or the Reagan Revolution, or Margaret Thatcher in England, we were now going to take the gloves off and tell everybody what capitalism is really about. It's the bottom line, profit. That's what we should be doing. That's what we are going to be doing. It's not our job as businesses to take care of the needs of society. So here we are, half a century later, and what do we have? We have a situation where there's more criticism of capitalism than we ever had 50 years ago, and there's more interest in socialism than we had 50 years ago, because there's lots of populism, so forth, in the world. People are very unhappy. Capitalism has been very good, but for a very small minority of the people, the rest feel left out. And I think what you're seeing is the effort of corporations to get out from under the very bad PR and the bad cloud that 50 years of their behavior has put over them. And so at least what they're going to do, word salad. They're going to give verbiage. They're going to give, lip talk to this. But I don't see much coming, because I don't see the change strong enough yet to force them to go beyond verbalism.
Yeah, it sounds like you're saying all they're doing is throwing them a bone. Nothing really serious.
That's right.
And there's no meat on that bone. Let's talk about somebody else then. Let's talk about Jamie Dimon. Here's a guy who's a little different. If Airbnb is trying to throw the American consumer and society a bone and saying we're going to be different, Jamie Dimon says, no, to hell with all of you. The only way business really works is if we, the business people, make the right decisions and run everything for the bottom line. And he went on CNBC and said the worst thing that's happening in America right now is people don't understand or appreciate capitalism, and some of them are even mentioning socialism, which is the worst evil the world has ever known. Not exactly his words, but pretty damn close. So Bernie Sanders comes back, listens to him, and puts out this tweet. Listen to this. Bernie writes, "That's funny. Jamie Dimon seemed fine with corporate socialism when his bank got a $416 billion bailout from American taxpayers." I mean, look, whether you're a Bernie bro or not, good on Bernie for essentially saying something which is true. The last guy in the world who should be criticizing socialism is Jamie Dimon from J.P. Morgan, right?
Absolutely. He's one of the biggest beneficiaries of the government coming in that we could imagine. It takes real audacity to talk the way Dimon did, given that he's been on the take from the U.S. government on a scale the rest of us can only imagine.
So when we talk about socialism, and a lot of people do these days for some reason, I think it's because we're in a political season, it really does have a lot to do with looking at it from a different perspective, that sometimes the ones criticizing socialism are the ones who are actually reaping benefits of something that we could call socialism, right? They're getting money from the government.
Absolutely, and they eagerly went to Washington and got down on their knees and begged for it from the same politicians to whom they donated the money to put them in the position of giving them that kind of bailout. I mean, and we've all seen it.
I got to tell you, it's always great having a conversation with you. Dr. Richard Wolff, I appreciate your time, sir. Happy Friday.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Likewise, tonight, world leaders are gathering in Israel to make the anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz, or mark the anniversary, I should say. The U.S. Vice President is going. So is Emmanuel Macron of France. Vladimir Putin is going to be there. Russia. Big countries, all the big countries, except one. Curiously enough, Ukraine. The president of Ukraine, Zelensky, says no, he's not going. What gives? Here now, NRS correspondent Michelle Greenstein. Fascinating. Why is Ukraine choosing not to be at this very important meeting?
Right. It's the fifth World Holocaust Forum in Jerusalem, hosted by Yad Vashem, in commemoration, like you said, of the 75th anniversary of the liberation by the Soviet Union of the Auschwitz-Birkenau concentration camp. Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky announced that his delegation will be giving up their seats so that Holocaust survivors could attend instead. Now, this is after reports that only 30 of these 800 seats were actually reserved for survivors. But Yad Vashem responded to this, and they said that this is not a public ceremony. This is a gathering of leaders, of world leaders. So still, Zelensky decides not to go. And in a tweet, he said this. He said, "We learned that many of the Holocaust survivors have not been able to visit the World Holocaust Forum. Our delegation gave them our seats, as many Israeli ministers did." But Yad Vashem actually responded to this again in a statement. They said, "It was explained to the president that we have assented to survivors who approached us in recent days. Therefore, his decision is puzzling, and it's a pity to take such a step in an event titled Remember the Holocaust." So they're saying that this is not an event for Holocaust survivors. It's for world leaders. So they say his decision was puzzling. But some are actually calling this a strategic move. They say that it could be the Ukrainian president's attempt to make appeals to the right wing in his own country, to appeal to these Western Ukrainian nationalists so that he can maintain his own domestic support. Right?
Let me stop you there, because you're using words that I think are going to go over people's heads. When you say Western Ukrainian nationalists,
sure,
can we say neo-Nazi?
It's certainly been called that, for sure. I mean, as we know, the far right has been on the rise.
We're talking about a guy who's not going to a Holocaust exhibit. Meanwhile, there is a history in his country of ties or collaborations with Nazis, not only during World War II, but some would even hint that not so...
In very recent history.
Yeah.
In fact, the far right, these, fascist, nationalist, neo-Nazi tendencies have really been on the rise ever since the Washington-backed coup of 2014. What happened, as we know, was an uprising, right? It's been called the Maidan Revolution, which ousted then-President Viktor Yanukovych. And U.S. politicians, as we also know, kind of triumphed this. They declared it a victory for democracy, and they smeared all the reports of the ultra-nationalism, of the far-right violence, as just Russian-backed propaganda.
Yeah.
But now we're starting to see that it may have not been Russian-backed propaganda, because over the past few years, we've really seen this fascist movement reemerge. We've seen the growth of extreme right-wing parties like the Right Sector and Svoboda.
And, it's interesting because Ukraine is in the news in our country right now every single day. Kind of puts a different face on what we're hearing every day, because what we hear is, oh, poor Ukraine, they're such wonderful people, they're victims.
Right.
And this kind of puts, just gives us a little perspective. One more thing.
Sure.
I understand there's a revelation about a Ukrainian historic figure?
Yes, a Nazi collaborator. So here's how we tie this all in. Both the Right Sector and Svoboda, which are the parties that I just mentioned, associate with a man called Stefan Bandera. This is a man who collaborated with Nazi Germany and is responsible himself for many atrocities while he was the head of the Ukrainian insurgency army. In fact, Petro Poroshenko, who was, installed by this U.S.-backed coup, is both sympathetic to these neo-Nazis, having gone as far as naming a street after Stefan Svoboda, which was only renamed last June. In fact, just this month, Rick, hundreds of people gathered in a torchlit march in the capital to honor this man for his birthday, which is why it's significant that just this week, the CIA declassified a report from 1949 that shows that the CIA considered Bandera a member of a terrorist organization and calls him probably the most important Ukrainian nationalist leader today. Here's what else they say. He was a member of the terrorist organization of Ukrainian nationalists and was involved in the assassination of the Polish Minister of the interior. So this is by itself not news. We knew he was part of this organization. But this revelation is significant because it shows that the CIA knew in 1948. This man who had a tactical relationship with Nazi Germany, they knew he was a terrorist as far back as 1948, which you may know was while Nuremberg was going on. And he was allowed to live free.
Great stuff. Thanks for tying it all together for us. It kind of makes a little bit of sense, and actually makes a lot of sense, and it kind of gives us a different perspective on things. Michelle Greenstein,
Rick.
thanks so much.
Thank you.
Say it again.
Rick.
I love that. Michelle. All right, let's do something now called Jock Talk. I wish we had a big animation for this, because look who's joining us. Ladies and gentlemen, Sarah Montes de Oca.
Hello.
And Steve-O.
What's up? How
you doing, man? All right, what do we got? Three cool videos. What are we going to start with?
Well, let's get through Turbo Jock Talk. First, we're going to start off with this Korean Taekwondo team. This guy jumps. You got to see it to believe it. It's literally 13 feet in the air. 4 meters. Well, you're going to see him. This isn't a springboard. This is just a mat. Look at this flying back kick. It's incredible.
How many feet is that?
That's 13 feet. Wow. Just over 13 feet. So they're part
How
of
many years practice did that take?
You know, I'm not sure, but he's pretty amazing. One more time at it, and then right here. Ooh, I mean, put him on a basketball team. I don't care if he can't play.
That's amazing.
He can get up. So now Sarah's going to get us into our next one real quick.
Oh, I thought you said Sarah's going to show us how she can do that.
Well, I was a gymnast once upon a time.
Okay.
Anyway, okay, trick shot. MLS soccer player. He can do more than just play soccer. Look at that. From the corner of the tunnel, Tommy Thompson plays with the San Jose Earthquakes. He can join the Harlem Globetrotters.
No!
Look at that.
First try.
I mean, I've seen these drills where you're on a basketball team and you shoot from behind the board, but look at that. A kick.
That's incredible.
Oh, my goodness.
As far as we know, it was the first try. But, yeah, he's ready for the MLS.
As far as we know.
There's a song. It's called,
even the Globetrotters.
You know that's a famous song, 1 in a Million. I'm not singing. I'm just kind of giving a tune.
It's like your hole-in-one in golf. It could happen once.
Right. It can happen once. And then there's the lie. Anyway, go on.
The next one's just funny. We can all have a good laugh right here because this was an amateur boxing match in Thailand. And these guys, nobody wins here, as you're going to see, because they're going at it. It looks pretty brutal here at some, I don't know, amateur ring here. And they get up, take a right hook at each other, and boom, they both go down. Maybe that was, left hook. Now,
what a coincidence. What are the chances,
both
man?
at the same time.
Good God.
They can't get up.
They can't get up. They've fallen and they can't get up with those left hooks. They just knocked each other out with wobbly legs.
You know, they always say it's a left and a right. And this was a left-right.
Yeah, something like that.
At the same time.
I've never seen anything like
that. And then finally, listen, there's one giant story that the whole sports world has been captivated by here in the United States. This is sad. Kansas is playing Kansas State, right? Take us through it.
Well, a brawl happens. You know, right here you're seeing the aftermath. So the game was over. It was 81-60. They're dribbling out the clock, Kansas is. Silvio De Souza gets it stripped from him by a Kansas State player. He runs to block it, and then mayhem at the end of the game.
And can I tell the folks something?
Yeah, sure.
This is a handicap section. Those people are in wheelchairs. They can't get out of the way, and you got 7-footers beating the crap out of each other in front of them.
You're right. Yeah.
This is insane and dangerous.
It is. It is.
So apparently these guys have gotten evicted from the league or
suspended. So four players got suspended, resulting in a total of 25 games. Silvio De Souza got the most with 12 games.
They should be
25. Wow.
Total, yeah.
Thanks, guys. We're done.
Thank you.
We're out, and we'll see you again at 5.